Welcome to Series 5 of the Lawyers Coach podcast. My name is Claire Rayson, and each episode of this podcast will feature myself or Oliver Hansard, both of us coaches and former lawyers, trying to find out what makes lawyers tick. We will be hearing from various guests and experts, and then at the end of each episode, we will both be reflecting on what they said. The Lawyers Coach podcast is brought to you by Client Talk and Hansard Coaching. In this episode, Oliver Hansard spoke to Sarah McCarthy, who is Chief Legal Officer at dunnhumby. She spoke to Ollie about the transition from private practice to in-house lawyer. She thought about the skills she looks for in her team and talked about why it's important to learn every day. But first of all, Ollie asked her what it was that attracted her to law in the first place.
Brilliant question. Well, one I ask myself often. I originally actually did a geography degree, which I loved, but then started to be attracted to law and to the conversion course in London. Really, and I remember being asked this question in my training contract interview, and I'll give you the same answer as I gave the partners who were interviewing me, which was...
It still stands true, does it?
It still stands true. I wanted to help people solve their problems, which, sounds a bit perhaps altruistic and glib, but fundamentally that's at the heart of the lawyer's trade, I believe. And I guess I've always enjoyed words more than numbers. So the law seemed like a good place to start.
And then that move to dunnhumby, what prompted that? What was behind that?
Yeah, so I think I knew I wanted to really get under the skin of a business. That's often the reason that in-house practitioners give for their move out of private practice, to really contribute to a business's growth and success in a more permanent way than you can when you're advising from an external perspective. On the push side, and let's be honest, there's usually a combination of both in most moves that people
Absolutely.
make. I guess I felt personally misaligned perhaps to some of the values and culture I experienced in private practice. At the time, I probably lacked some strong female role models who I could really aspire to emulate. And we're talking nearly 15 years, maybe more than 15 years ago now. So, I know things have moved on considerably since then, on all fronts, actually, which is brilliant to see. But at the time, values and culture still is very, very much core to what sort of interests me, makes me tick, what I really believe is at the heart of the success of any business, really. And I wanted to find a business where I felt really attuned to that and could really buy into to the values.
So you turn up at this crazy little company in Ealing, and you, having come from Slaughter and May, one of the biggest names in the legal industry, in terms of your legal skills and your commercial skills, how equipped were you for that new role, and what did you need to learn?
I should ask you the question back, Ollie, since you were my boss at the time.
No, you're the guest here.
So I think, from a technical skills point of view, I was brilliantly equipped. Slaughter and May gave me an amazing grounding in the law and in technical skills. That was never a problem. I think what I needed to adapt to really, really quickly to sort of, I guess, state the obvious, I was very used to my client being a lawyer, right? When you're working in private practice, normally you're working with the in-house lawyers, so you do tend to speak the same language. The move in-house was the big shock to me was, how different it was when your client is not only a non-lawyer, but somebody who may have never actually engaged or looked at a contract or anything vaguely legal before in their life until they've having to come across you in the in-house legal team. And that was a big shift in terms of flexing my style to get the right messages landed and to connect with all sorts of different types of people across the business. But one that I really enjoyed. I'm a people person at heart, and I that's a big part of what I love about being in-house is the massive breadth of types of people that you get to work with, and how you have to flex your style and put yourself in their shoes to understand where they're coming from and to get to the right result for them and the business.
So as new lawyers join your team, what are the things that they need to learn as they come possibly from private practice roles?
Yeah, so we hire lawyers into the team. Sometimes they've had in-house experience, sometimes they come fresh from private practice. One of the first things that I'm really upfront with them about them needing to learn is patience, because I hire smart lawyers, ambitious lawyers who come into the business, and I say, right, how long do you think it's going to take you to really get your head around how dunnhumby works? And normally the answer is, I reckon, a couple of months. And I say, actually, you've got to be a lot more patient and kind to yourself than that. You will always be learning about how this business works. To really get under the skin of it is going to take you at least 6 to 12 months. But frankly, even after 13 years, I'm still learning every day, which is one of the brilliant things about being in a business like dunnhumby, in a fast-paced industry, huge amount of change. So I think, becoming a bit, being humble about that, and not expecting, and being kind to yourself and not expecting to have all the answers straight away. Because if you do, you're probably not really getting to the crux of what the business issue is that you're ultimately trying to solve for.
Do you think that the remote working that everybody's gone through, that's made that harder then for lawyers joining businesses to get under the skin of their client?
I think it definitely has. Inevitably, I think we probably are better equipped, perhaps, in the in-house legal industry to help with that than perhaps in private practice. I mean, once you've learnt I struggle to put myself in the shoes of a trainee at a law firm. Doing a training contract remotely must be incredibly hard, because so much of what you learn is through being in the room and seeing the body language and observing meetings, certainly if you're talking some negotiation skills. But I think it has been hard. I mean, I've hired a number of lawyers through the pandemic. And I think we've just had to work extra hard at just really treating people like you are sitting in the office next to them. So if you've got a question, you can just call someone or ping them on Teams as if you were turning to them across the desk. And that's the culture that I've really tried to encourage in my team, so that we break down as many barriers as possible, just because we may be sitting in different buildings on opposite sides of the city or the country or the world in some cases.
And have they succeeded in doing that? Have they become, part of a cohesive team in joining during the pandemic? Because I'm with you. I think to move into a new role during the pandemic, someone's got to be incredibly brave to do that. So, yeah, how's that gone?
I think they've done brilliantly, actually. And I think, in a way, it's really interesting, isn't it? The how the pandemic has sort of changed the way that teams and businesses work. I think it's been a great leveler in many ways. And it's been because everybody, regardless of sort of what role or position you are in the organisation, you've got to see inside each other's homes. You've got to meet each other's children, if you have children, probably, or flatmates or pets.
The dog, yeah. My dog's always involved in my meetings, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I've had a number of people in my team say, they feel they know me so much better after 2 years of remote working than they did sitting in the office next to me, which was really gave me pause for thought. I was like, God, who was I in the office? I thought I was just the same person, but all of a sudden, it's been this leveler and actually been a cohesive thing that's pulled people together. I mean, that's not to say it's not a matter of rose tinted spectacles here at all. There's been some real challenges, but in a funny way, I do think actually, especially when there's a number of people who've joined during the pandemic, there's something that pulls people together there, and you kind of have to go the extra mile to make sure they feel included and up to speed and clear on what's being asked of them in their role. We doubled up on one-to-ones immediately that we went into home working, just to connect more, just to over amp on that, I guess.
And then obviously you need to lean on external counsel in your role. How much do you rely on external counsel on a day-to-day basis in the business?
Yeah, so we like many businesses, we use external counsel for overflow and project work primarily. And given our global footprint, we operate in over 30 countries around the globe. We use local counsel a lot for making sure we're across the local laws. But yeah, in the UK, it's largely for overflow and project work.
And do you need to put lots of energy into onboarding, particularly, external counsel based somewhere thousands of miles away? Do you need to put a lot of energy into onboarding them and making them understand what you do and what you're trying to achieve? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, dunnhumby is not a straightforward business for external counsel to get their head around. And, as any in-house lawyer will tell you, what they really want from their external counsel is to be an extension pretty much of the in-house team. That is a really tough ask, especially if you're just working with external lawyers who you might have one deal a year in Spain, for example. So you're not engaging them on a week in, week out basis. So something we actually did really effectively, having struggled with this for a while, we'd sort of put together packs of induction packs for external counsel. We actually pulled together a European forum, where we got our external counsel from all over Europe to come together for a full day on what does dunnhumby do. And it worked really, really well. We brought in people from the business to talk about what we do as well. It wasn't just a legal team telling them about dunnhumby, and that really energized them, engaged them. It built a bit of a community, actually, really, which has been really helpful to us. And it's so we need to refresh it about once a year, but that's been a really effective and efficient way of bringing external counsel in a region up to speed.
Great idea, and great to bring in the business as well, to get them to play their part. Fantastic. Yeah. So what skills do you look for then in your external counsel, away from obviously being, a cracking lawyer? What softer skills do you look for?
So yeah, I mean, you're right. There's the obvious things, right, around, of course, being a cracking lawyer, but nobody wants that, although you still get them, those long advice notes that need rewriting before you can pass them on or helpfully use them with the business. I think the softer skills piece, though, is so important, equally so, I would say, and historically perhaps has been overlooked a bit. For me, having shared values and a complementary culture is really key. And that's partly so that that you're going to work well together, and you're probably going to be working potentially on tricky issues, perhaps at unsociable times, and having a sort of shared set of values and a culture which sort of doesn't have to be the same, but that gels is really important. So yeah, on the soft skill side, I think that's really important. But then there's also a piece, I think, around how do you make that a true extension of the in-house legal team? And I think flexible resourcing models and billing models are all really key there. The other thing that's really important to businesses today is the piece around the diversity and inclusion piece, and whether it links in a bit to the values, but it's more than that. Both within the firm, what's the firm's approach to diversity and inclusion, and what are they doing about it? And then I guess the next step is how can they partner with me, their client, to help us progress the agenda there? Is there a sort of partnership that I think D&I is more than a nice to have these days. We know that we get better business results when we have a diverse and inclusive environment. And I think that private practice firms have an ever greater role that they could play there. And I think that would be a real strength for them and a differentiator.
Are they aware of that? Are they aware that they need to improve there, do you think?
I think some are. Definitely. And I think there's, good work being done across certain firms that I know of in the UK around apprenticeship schemes, offering training to their clients, not legal training, but, training around subconscious bias and other sort of elements. But I think it's potted and I think for in some firms, certainly they're coming from quite a low base and they're needing to catch up fast. Yeah.
But how do you work that out? How do you work out that you've picked the right, or you're going to pick the right firm, and there will be that commonality of behaviours there?
I'm all about having really transparent and sort of candid conversations, right? And that's part of what I do when I, certainly if it's firms that we're going to have, a decent amount of work with over a long period of time, I have that conversation and ask them, well, what are you doing and how are you measuring this, and how do you know you're progressing on D&I? What are your D&I metrics? And if they don't have a good answer for that, pretty quickly that they haven't thought about it too much. So I think it's just about making your expectations really, really clear. And then perhaps in the absence of metrics, if they're not looking at these things, putting forward a suggestion which is like, well, look, this is where let's work on something together. Let's figure out what is meaningful and what is possible, and take the conversation forward in that way to sort of help progress the agenda from our side.
And so a final question as we come towards the end of our conversation, and that's, I'm intrigued to know about your success model and what you think in your working life, what success means to you.
Yeah, so I think success is measured on all sorts of levels, right? And part of what I love about what I do is I'm really proud of my team. I've had the privilege to build a really fantastic team, and I love working with them. I really, really enjoy helping lawyers grow and develop and become brilliant in-house lawyers. But then if you take a further step back, success on an even broader perspective, and I think the pandemic has taught us all this to varying extents, how do you really make sure that you're sort of making a difference in the right way at the right time? How do you balance, I'm a full-time working mum, I've got a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old. For me, very personally, if I can feel that I am succeeding by my own definition of success across being a full-time mum and a full-time, chief legal officer, then, and a wife, I mustn't forget that bit, then that's good enough for me. And I don't always get it right, but I've definitely set myself too high standards along the way and been too hard on myself when I've fallen by the wayside. But if you can get up when you fall by the wayside and don't do it quite how you would have liked to, and you can pick yourself up and be kind to yourself and go again, then I think that's a pretty good model for success.
What a great place to end. Sarah, you're an absolute legend. Thank you very much for being on the pod. Wonderful speaking to you.
My pleasure.
So that was Ollie speaking to Sarah McCarthy of dunnhumby. Ollie, a really interesting conversation. What was your key takeaway?
What really struck me was about that need to have an alignment of values between a client and a law firm. So if you get that right, so much else falls into place. And I wonder how often law firms really think about that, are they the right firm for that client, or is it just another catch? That's, my biggest reflection, I think.
Yeah, and the other thing that I've kind of picked up that she spoke about was, when you're in a law firm, your client tends to be a lawyer. And when you move across into private practice, your client becomes the business. And the shift in mindset and the shift in the way that you need to practice when that happens. And it's something that we've heard over and over again from all of our in-house guests. And I wonder, again, whether firms, Helen Lowe was a great example of that as well, wasn't she, this series? I wonder how many firms realise the difference.
I think that's right. When you're practicing in-house, your client can be, on the next door desk. There's no hiding. You need to get the job done. So I think there's a real piece of work that needs to be done by law firms to invest and become part of the team, part of their client's team. And a lot of that will probably go unrewarded, maybe be unbillable, dare I say. But it's not really until you can do that you can really collaborate effectively and deliver the service that clients yearn for.
Collaboration and the billable hour. I think that's a good place to end this episode on. So, Ollie, thanks for speaking to Sarah.
Absolute pleasure.
And hopefully you will join us for the next episode, where we are both going to be speaking to Nicola Jones, wrapping up the series and thinking about the key skills that lawyers need for the future.
Lawyers Coach is brought to you by Client Talk and Hansard Coaching. If you're enjoying this series, please rate us on your podcast provider so that others can find us. If you're a lawyer and would like to take part in Lawyers Coach, please visit our website lawyercoach.co.uk for further details. And you can also join the conversation on our LinkedIn group Lawyers Coach. If there are any topics you'd like to hear us discuss, then just get in touch.